Welcome to the Marketing Millennials, the No BS Marketing Podcast. I'm Daniel Murray, and join me for unfiltered conversations with the brains behind marketing's coolest companies. The one request I tell our guests, stories or it didn't happen. Get ready to turn the up.
It goes back to the feeling of like if you can sit across the table with your customer for 5 or 10 hours, like, did you show up in a dirty t-shirt? Do you have dirt under your fingernails? Or you show up clean, you show up dressed, you show up well designed, well organized, prepared for the meeting? Like, that's what it's like to put out that great book. And if what you're trying to do is produce trust, represent yourself well, this book is going to precede all these meetings. It's going to be a clone of you out there representing you and your brand in the world. Like, you want it to really speak well of you.
Want to end the year on a high note? Impact.com helps marketers in retail, financial services, consumer goods, and B2B crush their goals well before the year ends. Talk about an ego boost. Use affiliate marketing, influencer campaigns, and customer referrals to finish 2024 strong. Check out impact.com/millennial today.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Marketing Millennials. Today, I have one of the best book writers out there, Eric Jorgenson. He has written books that have sold over 1 million copies. Yes, you heard that right, 1 million copies. And we're going to talk about how you could launch your own book, why it's important to launch your own book, and the whole process behind it. But I'm going to welcome Eric to the pod and let him tell his story, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Cool, man. Thanks for having me. It's been a very winding road, but I found myself in a really cool place where I get to work with a lot of really interesting people and help them tell their stories. So I'm glad to be here and get a chance to spread the good word.
Yeah, I want to get into, how did you even get into the space of book writing? How did you fall into it?
Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, it's probably not a surprise. Like, I was always the kid reading in the back of class instead of doing my homework. So I've always been a reader and loved writing, but that started on Twitter, kind of early on Twitter, and then early on blogging, and then eventually just kind of stumbled into writing my first book, which was the Almanac of Naval, by realizing basically that, like, books are this sacred, beautiful thing that is around for hundreds of years that everyone on earth reads and knows what to do with. And we were creating all this incredibly valuable information in podcasts and on Twitter that was just kind of like falling into the dustbin of history that only a few people were hearing. And I had followed Naval for like 10 years and really loved what he did. And so I just offered basically on Twitter to compile his most important ideas and put them into a book, in the same way that a lot of people have done with Warren Buffett, or that Blake Masters did with Peter Thiel to write 0 to 1. So I just volunteered to do it. And, I thought it would take 3 months. And of course it took 3 years. But along the way, to get this thing published, eventually I met Tucker Max, and I published through Scribe, and it was a life-changing experience. And, this book has absolutely blown up and far surpassed my wildest dreams, changed my life, and had a wonderful experience, doing it and publishing it. And I believe that what Scribe did was the future of publishing. And it's just quite crazy now that a few years later, I find myself as, CEO of the company.
One thing, before I get into the whole story of and how to publish a book, I want to go into one point, because I am a big fan of doing this in my own content, but that is like curation. And could you just describe the importance of curating content? Because everybody thinks you need to write original pieces. It always has to be original. It always has to be this, but what is the importance of curation?
Yeah, I think curation actually is creation. Like, the most liberating realization is just that you don't have to be original. Like, if you break down your favorite pieces of art, but whether it's a book or a movie or music, whatever it is, and you truly dig into like what the artist's influence were or what they were trying to achieve, they are almost always combining a few of their favorite things that are timeless, either timeless works or already popular things, and just like combining a few surprising ingredients, and making it their own flavor. Like, striving for originality is just going to end up being bizarre. And that's like that's about modern art. But if you look at stuff like Harry Potter's like an overused example, maybe, but it's one of the most popular books of all time. And what is it? It's a classic hero's journey. It plugs into every like old timeless trope of like magic and creatures and wizards that we've ever known. It almost feels like folklore. It feels so familiar. And it's a classic sort of mystery structure in the story itself. So, J.K. Rowling wrote a mystery novel that taps into our collective like unconscious uh, of our collective like sort of totems of what magic is. And she used the classic story structure of a hero's journey. Like, what's original about that? And yet it achieved all these incredible things and is like looked upon as such a beautiful work. So I think it's liberating to just ignore originality as a virtue. Um, and I think, what I've done is just curate the greatest of Naval. Like, these ideas were already out there online. They were in podcasts. They were clearly resonating with people. I just thought they belonged in a book. I didn't have so much ego as to think like I should go write down all my own ideas and what I think is right. I just recognized genius and said, I'm going to do my best to organize that genius for myself and others. And people really have appreciated it. So I think, curation is creation. And if you just get comfortable, like especially if you have a little imposter syndrome about writing a book in the first place, really just think of it as collecting the ideas that influenced you the most, highlighting those, making them accessible to others, or maybe bringing them into your domain. Um, and that should be uh, feel like much less of a mountain to climb.
Yeah, I want to also go into there's I don't see many companies out there or founders out there of companies curating. You see them curating on Twitter, you see them curating on blogs. They're writing all this good stuff, but they don't do the one of the ultimate forms of curation is writing a book or writing a book for the company. And I've seen a couple companies that have done it that have been very successful and use it as a tool to market and use it as a tool to go speaking. So could you how do if I was a marketer in a company and I wanted to write a book for my founder or I wanted to write a book for my company, what is the first step to get started on doing that process?
Yeah, I mean, the first step in no matter who you are, no matter what the author is like coming up with what value you're delivering to the reader. I think that should always be the North Star. And if you start with I think there must be a self-serving motive, right? Like everybody who writes a book, it's too hard, it's too expensive, it's too much effort to do to not have a selfish motive. So don't stress about the fact that you're trying to grow your business, you want a higher profile, you want to own some mind share in the market. That's all good. Like you need that motivation. But at the same time, you also need an answer to like, why should the reader care? What value are you delivering? What are you sharing that is going to help them? And if you have both of those things, that's a good start for, okay, we've got a clear road to move forward on a book. Um, Man, the number of marketers I talk to who are like, I've been trying to get my founder to write a book for years. I've been trying to get my CEO to write a book for years, because they know how powerful that is. They know that that's a bat signal to get that person invited onto stages to speak, invited onto podcasts. Um, it's even useful to just have a book in an advertisement or in a graphic and share that on social. Like the book can be the headwaters of all of this content, and just from a perspective of the medium is the message. Like a book is the highest credibility medium that there is. It's the most timeless. It's the most high effort. It's the most high polish. And yeah, it's hard to do. It takes, months or years sometimes. It takes effort. It takes investment. But that's exactly why it has such a high signal when it's a good book. It's hard to put together a book of comprehensive ideas that really resonates with people, that they're excited to sit down and read, that they're excited to distribute or share, buy for their employees, buy for their customers, send out to people. So it's an important thing from that perspective, and it can really be like the keystone in a whole marketing strategy that helps you build legitimacy or own mind share in a space.
Yeah, especially we're in such an age right now where we're going into founder-led, social, founder-led thought leadership, and the ultimate thought leadership and expertise sharing. I would say like the signal to expertise is, hey, okay, one, you start with having good socials, but the second, you have a book that shows that you've took the time to actually put expertise in the market. And I think where people are finally understanding the power of getting founders on social. Now, the next stage of that is, how do I get my founder to do even deeper and be able to get more of their content out there? And I think and how do I share the story with my customers in a more authentic, credible way? And that's why I think a book is such a powerful marketing tool to become more of authority in the space.
Well, I'm glad you said authority, because I think like it's no accident that authority and author are like 2/3 overlap etymologically, right? Like the letters are the same, the words are the same. Part of the way to build authority is to literally be an author and own the space and define the conversation. And to your point, exactly, like companies don't write books, people write books. And you need a way to tell the company's story and the founder's story in as deep and full of a way as you possibly can. So the way I think of this is like, how can you possibly spend 5 or 10 hours in a personal one-on-one conversation with every prospect or every employee or every business partner, every vendor? Like you can't possibly, like that'd be insurmountable. But through having a book that someone sits down and reads in their quiet moments, and they take in the very best of you and your ideas and your story, that's how you build trust at scale. That's how you scale up that kind of personal conversation, through this like timeless medium that we all interact with. And then they have an artifact that's like sitting on their desk or sitting on their bookshelf, and like that, not the memory of the book and the physical piece of the book. Like nobody ever throws away a book. It's impossible for me to consider throwing away a book. It feels so sacred. So that artifact just like sticks around with them and helps them, and that memory is there that you made with them and that trust that you built. There's so many stories I hear of people who actually, one of my partners in this business, the reason that he understood Scribe and understood this business, he had a problem. He was trying to figure out his estate and his will and his taxes. And so he literally just searched like best book on estate planning, found the book, bought it, read it, picked up the phone and called the lawyer who wrote it and said, I want to hire you to do all my family's estate planning. Like, I trust you explicitly. That's a 5-figure deal that came from this guy writing a book because he spent 6 hours reading it all about it, understood. I trust and I know, I agree exactly with this person's worldview. I believe they have a depth of expertise. I'm going to hire them. Boom, done. Like, impossible to market against that, right?
And it's also, I mean, you said something really key, is usually it's hard to execute what's in the book yourself. So you need to go find the expert to do that. Even it's not the exact play by play of how to do things. Most of these things are going to give you directionally where to go. But if you don't have time, or if you don't have energy, or if you don't have the expertise, you want to go find the expert. So you go to the person who wrote the book, or you go to the company that is associated with that book. And that's how it all spirals down.
Exactly. And a lot of people ask, like, how much of my knowledge should I put in the book? And my answer is everything. Put everything you know. Don't hold back on your expertise in your book, because it'll be a shitty book. So teach everything that you know, and people will hire you to execute on it. Or they'll hire you because they're just too busy to do it, right? And those are great customers. Like, that has always been Scribe's strategy, right? So like Tucker and Zach wrote this book, and they put everything that they know about writing and publishing books in this book. It's a thick boy. Like, it's got everything that you need. We talk to people all the time who don't need to hire us because they have an abundance of time and not necessarily the budget to hire us, but they bought the book, they read the book, they wrote their book, and they self-published it. Amazing. We also find people who bought the book, read the book, and said, you guys are the experts. I don't have time to write this thing. You guys do it for me. And that's also excellent. But we establish that credibility by giving away everything that we know in that book and on our blog.
So I want to go into more of the process. So I know the first step is, what is the value to the author? I mean, the audience. What is the value you're trying to provide? Next, we talked about this a little bit before the podcast, but you had to get a manuscript written. So what is the process of getting like a manuscript written for this book?
Yeah. So we go, there's basically 3 marathons, right? Like one marathon is writing the manuscript. Second marathon is manuscript to published book. And the third is, okay, I've got a book. How do I make the best use of it? So just talking about the first one and figuring out how you generate this book in the first place. There's a handful of ways you can do this. Like the old school way that most people think of when they think of writing is like, all right, I'm going to sit down in front of a blank Word document and I'm just going to start typing. That is brutally difficult, not recommended. And in general, if you haven't already started writing a book that way, you're probably not going to start. It's just too hard and too personal. And not everybody has that gift, right? Um, Another way to do it is to, and that I recommend, especially if you're an expert or a coach or something like that, start recording a lot of your calls and materials, and you'll find yourself in conversation articulating things that you know, teaching lessons, and you'll hear something and be like, "Damn, that was good." Not gonna lie, I crushed on that answer. I should turn that into, like, maybe that's a chapter, maybe that's a story that I should tell. So just start recording and transcribing, and just keep a note stock open and start bringing stuff in, and you'll start to see things fill out, and the structure will kind of emerge. Um, if you want to start working with professionals, most of the books that you see out there, this is like one of those kind of open secrets in the industry that most people don't realize. Most of the nonfiction books that you see out there are ghostwritten. So especially if you're a busy person, if you're a CEO, a founder, um, most of those books have an expert ghostwriter helping, and that ghostwriter will help you position the book. They'll help you structure the book. They'll interview you and pull out your best ideas, ask you follow-up questions, and ask if you have stories about that. And they will be listening for your voice. They'll be listening for your stories. They'll be listening for structure, for gaps, for consistency. And they will basically write the book for you after a series of conversations, being sure that they check your tone and your voice and things like that. At least that's the way we do it at Scribe. We're very meticulous about capturing tone. If you want to be the one with your fingers on the keys and really write it, but you don't necessarily want to go off and be on your own in the woods for a year and a half, like with a high risk of coming back and be like, oh my God, I wasted so much time. I don't even know if this is good. We can private coach you. So we'll basically assign you an editor and coach who will help you structure a writing plan, help you create a really clear outline, help you write in a systematic way and edit as you go, so that at the end of your 6 months or 9 months of writing, you've got this really polished manuscript that you're really proud of, that you're excited to go turn into a published book. So there's all kinds of, you can fly your scribe out and have them sit with you. You can have them go do research. You can have them interview other people, coworkers or your family members, the history of the company, the space of the book that you're writing in. It's a really wide range, but I think the biggest thing is just understanding that you're not in it alone, and that there are experts coming who either can help you write, or can help you edit, or can help you copy edit and proofread. People imagine author and writing as a very lonely thing, but it doesn't have to be. You just need to find the right team that you trust to hold your hand through the process.
And I think one of the good things is about doing it from a company per se, is usually a lot of the companies already have a lot of content out there that's just all over the place. Like Naval had all this content all over the place, and you just put it together in a well packaged format, and got some extra stuff out of him to put in there to make it even better and better, add some graphics, added this, added that. But I think so many of us marketers have so much great content out there that could be in a book, but we just don't know how to package it in a book, because it's a different skill set. That's why book writing is one of the hardest things to do, because unlike social and blog writing, you don't get a lot of reps at it. Um, and you need people who have got reps at it to help you with it. But also, we marketers know how to write great content. They just don't know how to put it in together in that long a form. So that's why I think you already have a step up if you really are creating great content out there that's not put together in a longer form. It's just content repurposing, like we said at the beginning of this episode.
Yeah, I mean, 2 points on that I think you hit on perfectly. Like, one is that the internet is absolutely the proving ground for the content, right? I think that's the secret behind some of the biggest titles that we see today, right? Uh, James Clear was a blogger for like 10 years as he wrote Atomic Habits. You know, Morgan Housel was a blogger for many 10 plus years before he wrote The Psychology of Money or Same as Ever. Like, they knew what worked because they saw what resonated online through Twitter or through email. They saw where they got good feedback. It's the same thing that I did with Almanac and Evolve, right? So using these high frequency, high feedback channels as marketers that you have on social or on email to get good signal from what's working and what people are finding interesting, and then using that to drive what goes in the book. But to your point, also, a book is just a different craft. You know, there's a lot more to it than, copy paste post. So you need, like, when we publish a book, it takes like 8 different disciplines, well coordinated over a 6-month process with hundreds of individual steps in the Gantt charts and the process that we've run, because we've done this thousands of times, and we do not miss deadlines, and we don't ship mistakes, and we've got all these checks in the system, because you have to get everything right, and you need to do it all at a high level if you want this book to pass the sniff test of, is this high quality? Is this well designed? Is this a trustworthy book? Or did somebody slap it together with some designers on Fiverr who didn't really know what they were doing? Like, you've got to design a book that feels like it came out of one of these, top 5 traditional publishing houses, just because that's what readers are expecting. And that's where the credibility and the authority comes from, is having something that truly feels high-end, well-designed, polished, quality. You want the margins to be perfect. You want the thing to be proofread to the nines. You want the copyright page to be formatted correctly. Like, you need it all to feel like that high-end book in order to have the impact on the reader and create the authority and the credibility and the presence that you want to with your reader.
And I think one other point you were making there is whatever product you put out in the world is a reflection on your brand. So if you slap it together, it looks like you're whatever you are, a slap it together person, or your company is a slap it together company. If you put it well quality, you look like you got your stuff together.
Exactly. Yeah. It goes back to the feeling of, like, if you can sit across the table with your customer for, 5 or 10 hours, like, did you show up in a dirty t-shirt? Do you have dirt under your fingernails? Or you show up clean, you show up dressed, you show up like well designed, well organized, prepared for the meeting? Like, that's what it's like to put out that great book. And if what you're trying to do is produce trust, represent yourself well, this book is going to precede all these meetings. It's going to be a clone of you out there representing you and your brand in the world. Like, you want it to really speak well of you.
What's up, marketers? Want to finish 2024 on top? With Impact.com, you can scale through affiliate marketing, drive engagement with influencers, and boost customer loyalty with referrals. Don't let the year end without hitting your goals. Visit impact.com/millennial and take control of your year-end strategy. That's impact.com/millennial.
So we started with value. You figured out the value of the audience. Then you got to get this manuscript written. After the manuscript is written, you have different routes to go to publishing this book. Could you describe why self-publishing is the better route if you're a founder or a brand versus going the other route, or what the pros and cons are?
Yeah, well, like, there's pros and cons for every route, right? And I'll just give you the landscape of publishing, and you can sort of self-sort into what makes the most sense for you. So the traditional model of publishing is like all the way one extreme, right? This is the big 5 in New York. You need an agent to write a query letter to get you submitted to these publishers. They get a ton of inbound. They select, a few hundred or maybe 1,000 authors a year to do their books, you might get a small advance. Advances tend to be getting smaller unless you bring a huge audience. And unless you bring an audience, you're unlikely to get a deal at all, let alone a big advance. Um, but if you want to go that route, the pros over there are like, if your life's goal is to make it on the New York Times bestseller list and like be on a certain imprint, then that's what you should do. This is kind of the prestige route. They have some distribution advantages over being self-published, but there's no guarantee that you will be the beneficiary of those distribution advantages. So that's one of the things that like they'll sell you on, but nobody can really guarantee you distribution. And if you don't write a great book that gets out there, you may find that the deal that you're giving up for that prestige and that distribution is you give up creative control, you give up the majority of the financial outcome. They're going to take 85% of your royalties instead of 15%. And you're also giving up, your rights, basically your control over your copyright over the long term. And that's a pretty onerous thing if you've got, if you're trying to write a book in the context of growing a business, establishing credibility, moving forward your business's agenda or your personal agenda, whatever that is. And then there's some like kind of hazy middle ground. There's some new entrant publishers that won't give you an advance, but will give you a higher share of royalties. Then there's people that'll take an even lower share of royalties, but charge you for the work. And you still have this kind of creative partner. And then all the way over here on this side is the world of self-publishing, where the author retains complete control of their royalties and complete control of their final creative decisions, and retains their rights. And so this is its own little confusing axis, because there's a lot of people self-publishing who do shit work and just, like we said, go on Fiverr or do full DIY, and don't really know what the polish is. And what Scribe does, and what Scribe really pioneered, and what I'm a believer in, is the self-publishing, so all the way on this side of the axis, but at the very highest level of quality, which we call professional publishing. So you're hiring somebody like Scribe, it's a professional service firm. So you pay us for our time and our expertise and the work that we do. But at the end of it, you own all your rights, you own all your royalties, you make all the final creative decisions, you do whatever is best for you, your business, your goal, your book. That is just what we believe in philosophically. I think that's what the market demands. And I think that's the right thing for authors. So that's what I did as an author when I published my 2 books. I fell in love with Scribe and its model. I think that what they do is the future of publishing, which is why I am a little biased in my ideology here, but I also like practice what I preach, and want to show authors sort of how liberating it is to truly be the 100% owner of their creative and their finances. And we can get into all the reasons why, but that's kind of the landscape of publishing. And, for each individual author that I talk to, the right decision may be somewhere along those lines.
Yeah, because I mean, I feel like there's the two ends of the spectrum. You said is one, hey, I want to get into that New York Times bestseller list. I want to be on these lists. I want to be seen and have an authority in the space in a different way. And then the other side is, hey, I really care about how I want to distribute my work, what I say in my work, what the title of my work is, how, and especially I feel like for brands who care about their voice, their tone, what's going to be out in the market, what customers we're giving this to, like how much we sell at the beginning doesn't really matter as much um, as what the other side is, because if you're going to make the New York Times bestseller, you have to do a lot of things. And also, I don't know if this is true, but I hear a lot of there's ways to game that system to like become a New York Times. It's not like you can get a bunch of pre-orders, people to buy 100,000 books, and then you're basically on the list.
Yeah. Well, the thing about the New York Times bestseller list in particular is that it's not actually a rank order of what is selling. Like, it is an editorial list that the staff at the New York Times just chooses what books they think should be on it. Like, I've sold more books than, I bet you, 99.9% of the books that have ever been on the New York Times bestseller list, and my book has never been on there. And that's fine. I don't care. Like, it's not going to sell more books by being a New York Times bestseller. Selling a million copies is a way better accolade than being a New York Times bestselling author. But the fact that everybody sees it everywhere means that that's kind of like they think that it's this great credential. But they've been sued, actually. The New York Times has been sued quite a few times. I think most recently by James Patterson, who had the top selling book in the country for months, and they wouldn't put it on, because in that book the police officer was the hero and the main character, and it was like during like Blue Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, political tension, and the New York Times just like didn't want that smoke, so they wouldn't put him on the bestseller list, and he sued them, and they admitted in court like this is not a meritocratic list of who sold the most books. It's just a list of books that we chose. So we don't have to put anybody on there. But that's one of those, there's another like open secret in the industry that blows people's minds outside of it. But all of those bestseller lists are gameable to some extent in some way.
Yeah, and I think it's also going to the other side of like the trends in marketing where people are trusting people over institutions. So the institutions are becoming less trustworthy than the people. So it's actually becoming less and less relevant and more relevant of how you can get your story out there in a way that you want to tell your story and how you can do that. So I think the best part of this is just what we've been talking, how you can get your authority out there in a way you want your authority out there, and how you can distribute it in a way that you want to distribute it, so it gets in the hands of the people you care about getting in the hands of, and it's not changed. It's not, because I've also heard stories about how covers are changed, chapters are changed, um, storylines are changed just to fit into what is a good book for in their terms.
Yeah. I mean, and especially like if they own your copyright, they can change stuff whenever they want. Like they're going back and editing Dr. Seuss books that are 70 years old. Like I've heard some nightmare stories, and we've got some of them on our blog about authors who lose control over their titles, over their author bio. Like there's one woman we worked with in particular who's she's a very attractive woman, but she doesn't want to like lead with her appearance, and her publisher like put a photo of her on the cover. She's like, this is not a my photo on the cover kind of book, like I don't want that. And they're like, well, too bad, it's not your choice, we think it'll sell more copies with a photo of you on the cover, so that's what we're doing. And she's like, can we at least pick a different cover? And they're like, or a different photo. And she's like, they said no. Like people don't really realize how little control authors have over these traditionally published books, which is heartbreaking for the author, because imagine like you have your name on this thing. This book is going to outlive you, and there's like a faceless committee who's making the final creative decisions about this book that represents you in the world to millions of people. That's not a position I would want to be in.
Yeah, I would. It's funny because the thought that comes to mind of this is Carrie Bradshaw in Sex and the City when she published her book. It's just like, I don't want this photo, I don't want this, and like we don't care. But I want to go into the next stage. So we're written the book. It's about to be published. Whatever route you get, what is some of the best ways to like get in the hands of the readers? What are ways you've seen be successful?
Yeah, so I think this builds on a little bit what you were hinting at about, institutions. I think one of the big things that's changed in the last, 15 years, let's say, is you used to need a publisher because you used to need connections to these big centralized media. Like if you didn't get a book review, in the New Yorker, or if you didn't get on a late show, you'd have no chance of selling books. And now everyone just recommends books to each other on social media, right? It's an open game. It's a meritocratic thing. Anybody can get out there. So I think it's much more a game of, have you already built an audience that you can launch this book into? Do you have or can you establish connections with influencers who have audiences that are going to be excited to receive your message and get benefit out of it? Amazon is a tremendous distribution platform. Most books now are sold on Amazon. So can you craft, your Amazon page is almost like a conversion landing page. And so you want to really think through, work very, very hard on your title, your bio, your author bio, your book's description, the cover literally through the lens of that Amazon page. A lot more people are going to see it there than are going to see it in a bookstore, right? Some of these things have really changed. Be prepared to spend a while on Amazon ads, I think, especially like during your launch period, and just see if you can drive those at a high ROI. And that's another reason why I think self-publishing is so important. If you're making $7 or $8 a book, you can spend $3 or $4 per conversion on Amazon to sell ads, where you're increasing your audience and you're bringing people along and you're building trust. But if you're only making $1 or $2 through the traditionally published path, you don't have that option to spend $3 or $4. You'll be losing money every book instead of making money sell every book. So it just gives you a lot more margin to play with. Another reason, and depending on your business and what you're trying to sell and to who, just sending this book out directly, gifting it to people who opt in, but shipping a really high quality package with your book with a handwritten note or something like that on a consistent basis can drive a lot of business. We work with quite a few authors who they know exactly who their buyer is. And let's just say it's Fortune 500 CMOs, or let's just go with that, because then there's 500 to 1,000. They write a book specifically for that audience that encompasses all of their expertise, and they very specifically target sending a book or sending 3 books to those people so that they can kind of reach them, reach their teams. They hand it to somebody, their junior person, and say, hey, read this and let me know if it's smart. Read this and let me know if we should do this. Is there a strategy here? Like getting your book into the hands of the right people. And we've seen these books and these strategies turn into $1 million offers just by putting this really high quality, tangible asset into the hands of the buyer with the budget and building trust with them in this really unique way. You can't do that. You can't reach those people with pay-per-click ads or, email placements. You've got to build that trust in a really deep, authentic way. Another is Amazon as a search engine. We see this is the story I described earlier with the lawyer. People search Amazon to solve their problems. If they buy a book, they see it, they solve a problem, and then they go buy B2B software, or they go buy high-end consulting services. I think, and then all of the ways that you can use a book on social to amplify your message, right? To get invited to speak, get invited to conferences, get invited on a podcast, all of the kind of downstream assets that, it's one thing to just put a quote out on social. It's another thing to put a quote that came from a book that came from, a book that was written by the founder of this business. These things just carry a little more oomph. And the way I like to describe a book, especially if it's someone's first book or a company's first book, is it feels like a tailwind on everything else that you do. It should make everything else a little easier. It should be a multiplier effect on every post, newsletter, speech submission, every ad spend. There should be, it's a step in the funnel, a step in the process that should make everything run a little smoother. And I've seen that happen, over and over and over again, especially for people who are really trying to own and define a category and create that, as marketing 101, right? Create the category, market the category, own the category. What better way to do that than be the person who wrote the book about the category?
Yeah, and I also think it goes back to what you said at the beginning, is that audience and that value. Make sure, if you're going to use it as a marketing tool for that, make sure that that value and whatever you're putting in that book is for that person you're going to send books to or try to get in the hands of. Because I think there's the other side of the ego, where people just write a book about someone's life story, and it's, who cares unless it's a really great life story. Instead of sharing, hey, this founder had a problem, they are an expert in this space, write about their expertise in this space, show that they're the expert, get into the hands of people who want that service, and show that they're the expert that way. That's a better way to
Exactly.
do it.
I mean, even if it's, there's, this seems like such a small thing, but if you're doing big deals, it can be really important. Just use it as a leave behind. Take a first, hour long introductory meeting, and then follow up by sending them a book, or leave a book behind in the meeting and say, look, this is way more effective than a follow up email. Hey, you asked me some questions. I only had an hour to spend with you. Here's my book. Here's everything that I know. Spend some time with it. If it resonates with you, or if you want to talk more, if you have questions that aren't answered in there, call me back, or let me know if you want me to take care of this problem for you. I've got friends who work in private equity who use this strategy. And, if you're this person selling their business has one business maybe to sell in their entire life. Trust is such an important part of that transaction. How are you going to build trust with dozens of people at once such that they feel comfortable selling you their life's work? Maybe at a discount because they know that you're the right home for that. How is a Fortune 500 CMO going to know that he should pick, one person to be their vendor for this or be their partner for this brand deal if they don't, have a way to build really deep trust in a unique way? How are you going to stand out from the 10 other people sending follow-up emails after that one, introductory meeting, trying to build trust? Like you're coming to a knife fight with a bazooka if you have something of that level of credibility and that level of depth to it.
Also, I think one thing social doesn't do justice is show how much expertise and how much depth it takes to do something. Social is
Yes.
really good at giving a taste, but if I hand you a book of how to, let's say, run a content marketing department, and it's a thick book like this, and I hand it to you, people are going to be like, "Oh shoot, this is going to take a long time to do it myself." So I'll still
Yeah.
read it to get up to speed if I don't have the budget, I don't have anything, but eventually need to hire an expert to do this. And if you're the expert who wrote the book, it's it shows how long the process actually is to do things with social, and even YouTube or podcasts don't do the justice of the actual depth of some of these things that take a lot of time to do.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it exactly, right? Like everybody's on social, but it's a shallow thing. It's a great way to build awareness. But I hate to break it to you, like nobody's scrolling back through every tweet your company or your brand or your founders ever posted to like spend 10 hours with that content and really build trust and depth of expertise. So the next step of the funnel below awareness is what I mean, depending on how you define it, nurturing or attention, trust, like that happens maybe more effectively in a book than any other medium. The only one that even gets its run for money, in my opinion, is podcasting. But not everybody's going to listen to podcasts. It's still a little bit of a subculture, maybe not accessible, especially if you're, marketing to someone in the older generations. Also, just really competitive and also a little sort of ethereal in the sense of like, it's not going to sit on your desk the way a book will and remind you that it's there and remind you that it needs to be listened to. It'll get buried in the feed, and maybe you'll get a half hour, an hour of that intimate kind of trust building connection, but it won't be quite the same feeling as a book.
And you don't really own the distribution with a podcast, where that's a different thing too. A podcast, it's on Spotify, it's on Apple, which their goal is to show you other podcasts so you get listened to. Where a book, you can send that book and be, hey, just read this one book, or let's just read this instead of, if I send my podcast to someone, they're going to probably go to Apple or Spotify, and then they have a little thing at the bottom. Here are other podcasts you might like, and then you're getting confused again. So
Yeah. How about you listen to the competitors podcast?
yeah,
Yeah. And,
exactly.
and just going back to the credibility of the medium, there's such rails in place to bring on, authors, to bring, to conferences to speak. Every conference I go to now, I just make a list of the speakers and I see who's written a book. And it's like basically 80% every time. And the ones that didn't are like true outliers, right? Very few people are getting invited to speak at a conference because of their podcasts. And those who are, it is a podcast that took them 5 or 10 years to build. Whereas you could have a great book out in a year, with the right help, the right team, and the right perseverance.
Yeah, some of my best friends in the industry, they just write books because they know they'll get big speaking gigs. They just know that's the game. They will write a book because they know they'll get a keynote spot here or a keynote spot here and get paid to do it. And it's this like engine that keeps them obviously gets them business too, but they write it because they know they're going to get speaking gigs, with speaking gigs end up getting them more business. And it's just this flywheel effect of what a book
Yeah.
does.
Yeah. The book really like ties together that, book, speaking, high value service business, or membership business or SaaS or something like that. And, when you've got a founder led brand, as so many are these days, it's a really important piece. And I think until you've really felt that wind at your back, it's hard to appreciate just how many opportunities unlock when you've got that book out there. And man, like I said, I know there's so many marketers who just like feel like they have to drag their founders or CEOs like into it, kicking and screaming. But it does not have to be a crazy thing. Like it's not. Everybody's got a little imposter syndrome about it. If I could cure imposter syndrome, there'd be a lot more books in the world, and I'm really working on it. But people don't have to stress too much about originality. They know that there's something really great waiting for them on the other side of getting that book done, and that with a good team of true experts who do this a lot, it's not a huge time commitment, honestly. Um, a lot of our authors over the course of a year need only spend like 50, maybe 100 hours of hard time like with us to get a book that is, takes somebody else 500 or 1,000 hours at a keyboard to write. Um, it's a really like quite a high leverage thing from that perspective. An hour a week for a year, and you can have a book in your voice. Like that's a pretty good like pretty good deal. I think you can sell that.
Hmm. Last question I have for you is, what is a marketing hill you would die on?
A marketing hill I would die on. I'll choose something other than a book is a critically important asset, because I feel like that's a pretty obvious stance by now. Um, I think I'll go with like first you must serve. Like if you are not leading with the frame of how can I be useful to my reader or listener, you're simply going to get your ass kicked by somebody who comes in with a service mindset. Um, I think that's the way the industry has been moving. I think that's the way it continues to move. And I think it's a wonderful thing for civilization if we all just make an effort to teach. Um, I think that puts the emphasis on the right things, for ourselves and for our readers. I think it builds authenticity. I think it's the right thing to compete on. And if we do it well, it's great for our customers, it's great for us, and it's great for the world.
I mean, that's a general statement too. I think businesses that have that mindset of, hey, we're here to serve the customer, we're here to serve their audience first. That's our ultimate goal, instead of thinking about, I'm trying to make a profit out of this person or revenue out of this person, or think of them just as a number, or think of them just as another deal. It's the mindset of, how could I help this customer, or how can I make this person actually successful with my product I'm trying to put out to the world. It's uh, way better mindset. And lastly, where could people find Scribe, what you doing, and follow you as well?
Yeah. Scribemedia.com is our site. You can poke around and look at the services and the success stories we've got out there. Me personally, and all my stuff is on ejorgenson.com. Got a newsletter. We talk about Scribe and my books and my podcast and stuff like that. So I truly like, I love, and I'm very honored to have a spot where I now get to help people kind of go through the portal of becoming an author that I went through that changed my life. So I love talking about books. I love book ideas. I love helping people figure out how to like apply a book to their business case or the issue that they're trying to impact, or a career transition, or building a legacy. Like these are endlessly fun conversations for me and the people on my team. So if you've got something tickling at you, or if you've got a Word doc titled book notes somewhere or something like that, please reach out. We'd love to chat with you, answer your questions, see if we can be of any use.
Well, thank you so much for joining and sharing the knowledge to all the marketers out there, which should have, it's going to be a competitive advantage if you write a book, because not many people are doing it, and they're not doing it because it's hard, but once you do it, it helps. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you. Thanks for spreading the good word about the long-term perspective and the beauty and power of books, man. I appreciate it. This was fun.
Thanks so much for listening. Keep tuning in to hear more great insights from the coolest marketers from around the world. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and follow the Marketing Millennials podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, I would greatly appreciate you giving us a 5-star rating. It helps bring more marketers into our community.